You are listening to the Monday Night War Review, where frankincense, big business, and big techs chronologically review the Monday Night Wars from 1995 to 2001 between WCW Nitro and WWF Monday Night Raw. Join us for this roller coaster ride of nostalgia and hilarity.
It's my life in the box in front of me. Taking talk in my arms is the soul of me. You walk by, ask to see me lay face down.
This is the first official battle, you might say. This is the first night that both shows are on the air simultaneously. Although Raw, as we will find out, was pre-taped from an August 28th showing in Canton, Ohio. Let's start with Nitro, I think. I think that should generally be our way to go. So Nitro did a 2.5 in the ratings. As like last week, we have Bischoff, Mongo, and Heenan on commentary. This is actually the go-home show before they do their Fall Brawl pay-per-view. So it starts with Bischoff doing a brief video recap of last week, and he informs fans that Vader is no longer going to be on Hogan's team for the War Games match. He says that he's gone AWOL, but in reality, Vader had just been fired.
I think what happened here, because I know you're saying he's been fired. I know they're saying he is AWOL. I think what really happened is Vader failed to file the proper paperwork, the WCW Executive Committee, and I would love to know what the paperwork was and what his filing date was and what he was expected to do.
Well, so are you talking storyline right now, or are you talking reality?
Oh, yeah.
Storyline.
I just enjoyed it because in my line of work, we have to do lots of filings and stuff. And all I can see is Vader at his computer, like, typing away a Word document to get ready to file it with the WCW.
Yeah, so. I bet he can't type very well with those humongous bear paw hands he has. Yeah, but so I think in reality, he actually was fired for some reason. That's what I've read online and stuff. But, I mean, who knows if that's actually true. So we actually get the classic Nitro set this week, too. Like, we didn't get it during the first ever episode, but now we have the kind of classic Nitro set that people are used to seeing. The commentators have moved into a different commentary booth that's more removed from the ring, and everything just kind of looks more traditional. That is, until the NWO comes about, and then all the sets and everything will change again and stuff. But I thought it was a little funny that Mongo could have compared Nitro to anything, like the Super Bowl or whatever, and instead he said it's the biggest thing to hit TV since the little old lady said, "Where's the beef?"
At least it made sense.
Yeah, I guess so. And then I like how one time Bobby Heenan said, "Hogan is in deep, 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 deep Nitro trouble." And he clearly wanted to say deep shit. And Bischoff was even like, "Oh, easy there, watch it, man." Like, it was like, and I thought they clearly weren't that embarrassed about the Luger promo where he said he was sick and tired of playing around with kids, because they not only replayed the actual video clip of the promo, but then at one point Bischoff just basically repeated it word for word too. And so I was like, I guess they didn't really see the humor in it at the time.
It was a more innocent time.
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, they were trying to push the whole, like, WCW is where the big boys play, so I guess it just sort of fit their motto. Yeah. So the first actual match that we get after all the recap and the Fall Brawl hype, the first match that we actually get is Alex Wright and Sabu. I have, my own thoughts and opinions, but Tex, what did you think about the Sabu premiere?
Well, I was kind of excited about it at first. I had no knowledge previously of Sabu ever being in WCW. So we'll start off with his entrance theme, which I thought did not fit at all. Several WCW themes to me just seemed generic. Not really having much to do with the character. I know there's a few, like you'll have the Sting theme that has lyrics, and Hogan's theme had lyrics, and I'm a big fan of the Steiner Brothers theme that eventually came along in WCW.
Wait, is that the Michigan fight song or a different one?
Oh, there's a different one. It's called
okay.
like It's called Steinerized, I think, and there's a really
Steinerized. Awesome.
oh yeah, check it out.
Okay.
I would definitely check it out. It's cheesy as it's very good. It's very good. I love it. So we have this match, and I didn't really diagram the entire choreography of the match, but I pointed out a few highlights that I thought stood out. Alex Wright's entrance. I remember Alex Wright from WCW back in the '90s. He was, that German wrestler. He was actually a pretty decent worker, threw a really good German suplex. Had that dance. We didn't get an Alex Wright dance in this match, but he did have a signature dance that he would perform. I noticed that Sabu performed like a springboard back to the inside of the ring on Alex Wright when he was down.
Yeah.
And it looked like Sabu was kind of hobbled after that, kind of hurt. I don't know. It seemed like he was hurt. He was favoring something for like the rest of the match. And I don't know. I had that as a note. Like, did he hurt himself on that? I know he crashed and burned off that chair up to the guardrail when he set up the chair on the outside of the ring, springboard off of it.
Yeah, that looked pretty nasty.
Yeah, it's pretty typical ECW style Sabu stuff that he was trying to incorporate in WCW here. Really nice Alex Wright missile drop kick. He had a really nice leap to the outside of the ring. Really nice top rope superplex. So I have a pet peeve on superplexes where they take forever to set them up.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't like when they take like 30 seconds to set it up, and it's like we're both trying to balance each other, and then we finally go for the ride off the top rope.
Yeah.
This one, they set this one up pretty quickly, and it looked pretty good.
I liked how Mongo called Alex Wright the German Dynamo at one point. But they did a pretty good job of putting Alex Wright over. They said he was only 20 years old. I thought that was pretty impressive. And then they said that he was the son of Steve Wright, and I didn't even know he was second generation. And they also did a pretty good job of putting Sabu over. Heenan said that he was suspended in 17 countries and just all this stuff to make him sound like he was crazy. And Mongo compared Sabu to fullbacks that he had played with. And at one point he even said, like, I used to play with these fullbacks who would have the greatest game of their life and then not remember how they did it. And I was like, Mongo likes making the concussion references about people getting hit in the head and not remembering things or being punch drunk or whatever, and I was like, another concussion reference from Mongo. The finish was what kind of bothered me a little bit about this match.
I did not care for it.
Yeah.
I do not like this whole you can reverse decisions. So that's 0 out of 5.
0 out of 5. Yeah.
The wrestling, fine. Sabu, I got the whole Heenan, selling him. I think he might have oversold him a little bit by calling him Suicide Sabu and a raving lunatic. Like he should have stopped at some point. It was edgy. As far as I remember WCW, the whole reversal of the decision thing, I was like, that's not cool.
It's another Nick Patrick debacle. Whether Nick Patrick is screwing up on his own or if he's been written to screw up, it just always seems like Nick Patrick is doing something asinine as a referee, I gotta say. So Sabu wins clean in the middle of the ring with a move from the top rope. I guess Bischoff called it something like the Arabian drop or something. And he won with a move clean in the middle of the ring, but then afterwards, Sabu sets up Wright on a table outside and does a dive from the top rope onto him through the table, which actually looked more painful for Sabu than Wright. He kind of missed him, overshot him, and sort of just like went through the table on his own. Afterwards, Nick Patrick decided to reverse the decision and disqualify Sabu, and Mongo said that it was justice. He's like, you have to abide by the WCW rules. I wasn't too happy about that. I thought like they should have just let Sabu win clean. It was another weird 3 count from Nick Patrick, if you guys noticed that too. Like, I mean, he got him, like he pinned him 1, 2, 3, but Alex Wright like kicked out almost like right after the 3 count, and I couldn't tell if that was just supposed to. I don't know. It just looked weird to me.
I noticed that too, and I've been noticing that ref's a weird little handshake when he's bringing it up.
Yeah, man. As soon as like you realize it, you can't like unsee it with Nick Patrick. Like he does it like every time. By the way, last episode I said that Sabu was only going to be around for this one match. I stand corrected. Because after this match, I was like, oh, did Sabu leave because he was unhappy about how this was booked? But I looked into it, and he's actually going to be around for a little while, and he's going to continue fighting some cruiserweights in WCW. So I'm happy about that. Like I said last time, I like Sabu. I gave this 2.5 stars, but I think I'm going to drop it to 2 because the finish stunk. After that, we got an in-ring interview with Ric Flair conducted by Mean Gene. Basically, Flair was upset with Arn Anderson after last week's attack, and, again, they're just setting up for the Ric Flair-Arn Anderson match that's going to be at Fall Brawl. And in Fall Brawl, that's actually taking place in Asheville, North Carolina, where both Flair and Anderson have strong wrestling roots. So I think they were really trying to bank on that territory where the guys were pretty famous. For some reason, Lex Luger shows up. And for whatever reason, Flair, puts him over and talks about how great Lex Luger is. And I just thought this was a little bit weird. I mean, what did you guys think of this Flair interview and the Luger segment?
I liked when Flair's walking out, he says Showtime, and then he says learn to love me. I just enjoy Ric Flair. The whole Lex Luger thing, I did not understand. I wrote down in my notes, I think Ric Flair said this to Lex Luger. He said, I know you got something to say, or I know you got something you want to say. And then I think Lex Luger just left. So it was, I was let down.
I thought it was interesting that Flair seemed to be shaming Arn Anderson for going home and spending time with his family. It's like he was shaming him for being a family man. It kind of brought me back to, Street Fighter and Guile and go home and be a family man.
Amazing.
But but yeah, Luger, yeah, it seemed like they're trying to get Ric Flair, his promo skills, to kind of put Luger over because, with his lack of promo skills. And I just found it funny that Flair eventually comes around to saying, the package takes control.
Yeah, at one point he just called him package. Not even he's like, isn't that right, package? Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, I wrote the same thing text where I was like, okay, Flair is clearly doing 2 promos for the price of 1 because they don't trust Luger to say anything. I think this is kind of funny. I was wondering if Lex Luger was having flashbacks to his early 90s days in WCW when he was champion and all the fans would ever do is chant, "We want Flair." Lex Luger must have been sad a lot of the time, I feel like, because he just never really got the respect or the push that I'm not going to say he deserved, but that he probably wanted. It was a weird promo. It did a lot more for the Arn Anderson Flair feud than it did for Lex Luger. I thought it was funny. Right after the promo, they did like a Fall Brawl hype, and it looked like Mongo really wanted to say something, and Bischoff just cut him off. Like, he was literally like, I know you want to say something, Mongo, but we got to go down to the ring. And Mongo
that's what that note was for.
Yeah, it was just funny because Mongo waved his hands like he was pissed off.
Real quick, back to Mongo, and this was in the Alex Wright match. At some point, Bobby the Brain said, how many weeks is he going to be here with us?
Yes.
I wrote that down too.
Yeah.
And then Bischoff said, a long, long time.
Which is sad.
I just love the way Bischoff said that to Heenan, a long, long time, man. Get used to it. So we moved into the Sting versus Wall Street match. And this is the first time they refer to Wall Street as VK Wall Street. And that's just one of the first digs of many that this show is going to take at the WWF. If you can't put it together, they were calling him VK Wall Street to make fun of Vincent Kennedy McMahon. But that is a small, subtle shot at WWF compared to what is to come on this episode. They were bringing the heat at the WWF this episode. This is when Bischoff throws shade at Raw for being pre-taped. He says something along the lines of, if you're thinking about changing the channel, don't bother. It's 2 or 3 weeks old. Shawn beats the big guy in the main event with 3 super kicks. And he also says that HBK's super kick wasn't good enough to earn a green belt at the local YMCA, which I thought was a great rip, even though I don't think it's true, but it was just a great diss to Shawn Michaels. He also drops WWF's name explicitly at one point and claims that Luger won't be the last wrestler to leave them and join the WCW. I was like, man, he is just having at Vince. At one point, Mongo calls the WWF Bush League.
Yes, he does.
And I love how he says that they named their show after a bunch of uncooked eggs, making a reference to Raw, whereas Nitro is sizzling, as he put it. Yeah, I mean, like I said, I was so caught up in the Monday Night War aspect of things that I didn't even really take that many notes about the match. But, I mean, what did you guys think of Sting versus Wall Street?
I was entertained. Not super entertained. I'll give it 2 out of 5.
Me too.
I gave it 1.5. Wall Street's attire was throwing me off. Kind of used to him being in that business shirt with the tie and the black pants. The singlet with the dollar signs on it kind of threw me off. I had notes about like the commentary lines from Bischoff, the shots at WWF, the Bush League's crack from Mongo.
Well, there was one Mongo line. I think it was after Sting got off a nice move on VK Wall Street. It was, I hear the stocks and bonds going off all over town. And
yeah,
again,
that's good.
Does not make a lot of sense.
Yeah, I liked his line where he said, when he said to Sting, like, yeah, open up that cash register and get yourself some change or whatever. That was actually pretty good because he had just like walloped Wall Street or something. So I actually thought that was pretty funny. Like, I don't know why, but I kind of find Mongo endearing. Like I said, I think my patience for him will probably wear a little thin, but there's just something about him that I find really hilarious. I'm reading this book that's called The Death of WCW, which is really entertaining so far. And I read that like down the line, Bischoff is gonna like put a monitor under the announcing desk so he can watch Raw and make changes to Nitro on the fly. I just love how dastardly Bischoff is being about the whole war. But yeah, I gave this match 2 stars. I think it did more to promote Nitro than it did either of these two workers. But so then we get a brief promo for WCW Saturday Night, which will feature the debut of Disco Inferno. I had to laugh at this card for WCW Saturday Night because it just looked, so pitiful. And I'll splice it in the screenshot so you can see what the matches were. But then we move to Randy Savage versus Scott Norton, which was the match that I was definitely looking the most forward to based on what they had announced last week. I have a lot of stuff written down, but business, what did you think of Savage and Norton?
I enjoyed this match. I enjoyed Norton just taking out his anger on Savage. The whole is his back broken aspect and him coming back and winning with kind of a fluke, I enjoyed. So I'm actually going to give the match my highest rating yet, 3.5 stars.
Yeah, like I definitely enjoyed how much Scott Norton just beat the hell out of Randy Savage. That was definitely some good stuff. And I love how the bear hug was the real damaging blow. Like they were like, he caught Savage in a midair and just squeezed the life out of him, and
literally 3 seconds, and then he threw him. And so I was like, I get the whole aspect of the bear hug, but they could have had him in there for like a minute or something. So it was a little too quick. But
Bischoff was so solemn, like he was so solemn the whole time. Oh God, guys, I really think Randy's hurt.
Yeah,
it was good. It was good. Yeah.
Apparently, Norton's crippled a lot of people in Japan.
I know.
Yes.
That sounded so bad. Like, in storyline, that's great, but, like, that's, like, the last thing you want to do in real life.
So this was my highest rated match on the card. I gave it 3 stars. From the Pearl Harbor opening, typical angry Scott Norton. The announcers early on, they were trying to put over his bench press. They were saying he bench presses over 500 pounds, and then, you see him doing power moves, press slams, and whatnot. Norton had a number of, like, big-time moves in this match. I mean, y'all were talking about his the bear hug, and then we had Savage selling the lower back. Big power bomb near fall from Scott Norton. He always threw a nice power bomb. That double rib breaker to press slam was a little sloppy. The big power slam off the ropes with a near fall. I mean, everything Scott Norton does is high impact. The announcers, you guys mentioned that the announcers were putting over him working extremely stiff in Japan, which is apparently a thing because the Steiners were like that too. I'm pretty sure Vader worked extra stiff over in Japan possibly crippling a few folks.
Strong style, baby. Strong style.
But I liked Heenan during the match with the commentary. He was kind of working with Mongo. He was setting Mongo up with some football references. Because Norton threw a shoulder block, and then he was kind of trying to throw Mongo and alley-oop there with a football reference and having him chime in that way. I thought that was kind of cool. They're actually trying to work together a little bit, which was actually pretty nice.
I noticed that too. A lot more football talk in the commentary, I think, for the sake of Mongo.
At one point, Bischoff was putting over Norton hard for his arm wrestling championships and stuff. And he just brought up some random person that Norton had beaten in arm wrestling, and Heenan was like, who? And Mongo said arm wrestling doesn't help very much if you're getting hit in the head. And I was like, this man loves to talk about shots to the head. He also said that Norton looks like he has as much intelligence as a dead amoeba. Was a line from Mongo that I liked. Yeah, I agree with you, Tex. Like, Norton was just throwing the bevy of power moves. I think my favorite thing that he did was this like vicious elevated DDT where Savage's feet were hanging from the top rope and he just like dropped him with a DDT. That looked awesome. The fluke finish, as Business brought up, like normally I would like probably hate this kind of thing, but for some reason I just thought it was so great. Like, so the Dungeon of Doom comes out to interfere, and the Shark gets knocked unconscious and falls on top of Norton, pinning him to the ground, letting Savage then hit the elbow from the top. They called the Shark the Avalanche, though. I thought that was a pretty big mistake. I'm pretty sure that was like his name before he became the Shark. Like, he was like Earthquake in WWF, and then I think was like the Avalanche for a brief period in WCW. They were calling him that, and I was like, he's the Shark now, guys. You got to get your characters right. But that was just I thought a good finish that kind of justified the way that Savage would beat Norton after taking such a beating himself. I also gave this 3 stars, and I thought it was definitely the best match on the show. I thought Bischoff didn't do such a great job with Norton at the end, because he said Scott Norton had a tremendous opportunity on Nitro, and let's face it, he blew it. And I was like, I don't know if he blew it. He kind of got screwed. Like, did you just watch the match? Like, why are you burying him even though he looked so strong throughout the match and then was essentially robbed? And I was like, if I was Scott Norton, I wouldn't have liked that too much, Bischoff.
In any event, I enjoyed the whole Shark coming out, getting, punched to the head and beat a giant fat dude, falling on another guy. And that's the reason he lost. It was creative. I enjoyed it.
I love the finish, personally.
Yeah, no, I think we're all in agreement that this was a solid match for sure. So we get a very brief shot of Luger making his way to the ring, and then we get a fall brawl ad. This is where Bischoff repeats the playing with kids line. And then we get a Hulk Hogan versus Lex Luger match for the WCW World Championship. I appreciated Hogan's pyro. I'm always kind of a big fan of people who get pyro in their entrances. It doesn't take much to please me with that. I don't know why I enjoy the pyro so much. I used to love when Psycho Sid would come out on WWF and get his crazy pyro. Pretty sure Razor gets some pyro when we do Raw later, but they spend a lot of time plugging Fall Brawl during this Luger Hogan match, which I think they rightly should. This is the Nitro before the pay-per-view. The whole storyline is who's available to help Hogan tonight. They say Savage was beat up from the Norton match. Vader's gone AWOL. Sting was in a match tonight as well. And that's kind of the whole thing just leading up to Fall Brawl in general is kind of, Hogan's team is down, 4 men to 3 right now, and there's kind of dissension in their ranks and what have you. In terms of the match itself, one time Luger no-sells a suplex, and so then Hogan returns the favor. So they're both just no-selling each other's moves. At one point, Bischoff notes that we have an evenly split crowd that's cheering for both wrestlers, and that was true. I don't think he was just making that up. And I think that's always a good sign for a promotion. If 2 of your stars are getting that reaction from fans, it means they really care about the match. They don't know who's going to win. It's not so predetermined. So I thought that was pretty great. This is another time that Bischoff throws shade at the WWF when he says he's talking about Kevin Nash. He doesn't say his name specifically, or let's say he's talking about Diesel. and he says that the WWF champion barely made it past the mid-level in WCW, and I was like, damn. He's just like burying Kevin Nash. But what's funny about that is when Nash was first in WCW, they booked him as Oz, like the Wizard of Oz. It's awful. Like he comes out in this big like emerald green coat and has this fake big white beard, and like what were they thinking? Like you have this like 7-foot monster and you book him as Oz and you dress him that way, yeah.
Yeah, and that's something we'll get to in WWF Raw. Same thing. You have a talented big guy, and you give him the weirdest gimmick.
And wasn't Kevin Nash also Vinny Vegas in WCW?
Yeah, I mean, I think he had a bevy of bad gimmicks in WCW for sure. As a side note, at one point, Mongo and Heenan are talking about the Green Bay Packers, and Heenan basically says that he's not afraid of Reggie White, and I thought that was really funny. And Mongo took it like so seriously, like Heenan was like, "Oh yeah, you tell Reggie White to come here, and I'll show him what I think of him." And Mongo was like, "Ho ho ho!" Like it was just really funny. I liked it.
If I could jump in on that real quick because I thought that whole back and forth was funny because Heenan goes, anyone can play for Green Bay. I guess he was referencing Luger's football career and how he almost made it, and then I'm pretty sure that year or the very next year, Green Bay ended up winning the Super Bowl. So,
oh, that's funny. Something I learned. I was watching. I won't spoil anything, but I was watching Fall Brawl last night. I didn't finish it, but I wanted to see what the pay-per-view was going to be like, and I didn't know that Flying Brian Pillman played for the Cincinnati Bengals at one point.
For a short time.
I was very surprised by that because, like, some guys, they say, like, oh, yeah, like Leon White, like Vader, he played in the NFL. Like, this guy played in the NFL, this guy played in the NFL. And you're like, okay, that makes sense. With Brian Pillman, I was like, what? Like, I was just very surprised. Back to the Luger-Hogan match. I was really excited last week for the potential to see a Luger-Hogan torture rack, and we got to see that. And Luger looked really great, hoisting Hulk's huge body up and, bending him in the torture rack, and but then we had another kind of weird finish where Luger's got him up and the referee is, picking up Hogan's arm and letting it fall down to do the 3 count or whatever. And then Luger just drops him before Hogan officially gives up. And, like, Luger looked like he thought he won the match. But the referee's like, no, Hogan didn't give up. And it just was kind of like, I couldn't tell if it was intentional or not. But, like, and I think that's always kind of a bad sign with a finish if the fan is left wondering, like, did they book it that way or did they just screw up? Or, and so it turns out Luger didn't win from the rack, and so then he goes to try to quickly pin Hogan, and of course Hulk kicks out, and then Hulk does his whole, oh, I'm going to Hulk up on you routine, and, he hits the boot, hits the leg, but we don't get a clean finish. Just like last week, the Dungeon of Doom come out, and then there's a big kind of melee in the ring, and then there's a whole thing that follows. But before we get into the kind of Luger, Hogan, Savage, Sting interview that happens at the end, what did you guys think overall of the Hogan Luger match? I gave it 2 stars.
I'm leaning towards a 1 star. I noticed, the whole torture rack thing. I have to imagine that was part of the plan. It's just Luger doesn't know how to, sell this stuff to the crowd. It bugged me that they're selling this as the match of the century, and then they end it with just Dungeon of Doom running in. It should have been I would have been happy with a clean finish, with Hulk winning. But, I understand they have to set it up for something bigger than Monday Nitro.
I gave the match 2 stars. One real quick note on Hogan's theme. I'm with you, Frank, that it's growing on me. His WCW theme is definitely growing on me.
I love it.
Yeah, I'll throw that out there. But I did give the match 2 stars. For some reason, well, not for some reason, but I didn't, you don't expect the greatest technical wrestling from a Luger-Hogan match. I thought the no-sell suplex spot was kind of cool. The torture rack spot was really nice, too. Luger did look great, putting him in the torture rack, holding him up there for a while. And then when he eventually dropped him, he could have just dropped him out of fatigue because Hogan's a big dude. So, then you get the near fall and all that. With the Dungeon of Doom finish, and I had this note from the last match in all capital letters. Like, who are these guys?
I know.
I mean, they keep coming out. I loved their involvement in the past match. I thought it was perfect, setting up the Savage Elbow. Anytime you get a Savage Elbow, I'm all for it. But who are these guys, man? Why are they interfering in a Hogan-Luger match? What is their, relevance to the story? I'm not following.
Yeah, I mean, I think they were just kind of another attempt to give Hulk Hogan some antagonist, who's like some monstrous, like, it was all about Hogan versus the monster for a very long time. That's how Hogan was just booked for a very long time. And I think the Dungeon of Doom is like a sad version of that, though, because it's like, they have to have like 4 or 5 guys just to like try to take Hogan out. And I will say that they did a lot better with their ambush this week than in the past week. And basically, the Dungeon of Doom interference led to a big argument between, Hogan, Savage, Sting, and Luger after the match. Hogan and Savage are accusing Luger of being in cahoots with the Dungeon of Doom because he was the only one that they weren't really attacking when they came out. Sting comes to the defense of Luger and invites Luger onto their War Games team. I love how Randy Savage was so paranoid about it. Like he wasn't buying it at all. And Savage even accused Sting and Jimmy Hart of also being suspicious. Even though
I really enjoyed that.
Yeah, Savage is the man.
here.
Savage is the man. Even though Jimmy Hart clearly had an alibi because he was the one who ran backstage to get Macho and Savage to help. So it just goes to show how just crazy Savage is. And what I liked is that Sting is really friends with Luger in real life, and Savage is really paranoid in real life. So I just felt like everyone was kind of like playing their real personas, and so they're all arguing, and they say that Hulk Hogan gets the final vote about whether Luger should be on their team or not. Hulk says he's torn apart, but he lets Luger onto the team. And Luger agrees to join them as long as he gets a rematch for the championship. And Randy Savage gets a final line in of like, you see, he's got an ulterior motive.
Wait, now, real quick, tell me about this whole Savage is paranoid in real life thing.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it mostly had to do with Elizabeth.
Yeah.
He was like very, very protective and jealous about Elizabeth, and he would always like kind of hawk her and always be suspicious that other wrestlers were trying to mac on her and all that kind of stuff. But he also was just kind of he was just a very obsessive person in general. Like he would like carefully orchestrate all of his matches, like move for move with the guy like ahead of time, and he was always just very worried that certain people were gonna kind of screw him over, often like Hulk Hogan or Ric Flair or somebody. Like he just, I think like kind of it was sort of justified in a way that he was so paranoid, but I mean that was definitely his reputation backstage.
So it's funny you bring up the thing about Miss Elizabeth, because I was watching, I forget which WrestleMania it is, but it's where Macho Man beats Ric Flair for the championship, and the whole premise of the match is that years before, Ric Flair had dated Miss Elizabeth, and I forget, I think it might have been Bobby Heenan. I don't really recall who the commentator was, but he kept making jokes about how Miss Elizabeth could go back to a real man in Ric Flair. So that's interesting to know that Macho Man was that paranoid about his lady, and then they built that into an actual storyline.
Yeah, I remember. I think that was WrestleMania 8 when Savage and Flair went at each other, if I'm remembering right. But yeah, I remember in WWF magazine they had like pictures of Flair and Elizabeth like at a swimming pool, like feeding each other strawberries and stuff. It was they did a really good job of building that feud. And yeah, I would watch Savage and Flair any day. What did you think of the War Games segment with the 4 wrestlers, Tex?
I enjoyed it. Like you said, Savage is paranoid in real life, and I thought that was shining through, loud and clear. Not having been such a WCW fan growing up, I guess I would need a little background on how the actual War Games matches work. Like, are they like the Survivor Series 4-on-4s that we used to have? I'm not terribly familiar.
Yeah, I mean that's why I'm in the process of watching Fall Brawl right now, because I just kind of wanted to check out like how it went, and I'm kind of assuming that they beat the Dungeon of Doom. It doesn't seem like they would lose, but maybe they do lose, and that's gonna set up the tension between the the faces and stuff, and obviously they're leading to some kind of Luger Hogan rematch. So I mean, if they do lose the Fall Brawls War Games match, then like that would clearly create more tension, and it would confirm that Savage was right about Luger's ulterior motive and all of that. Heading into the Fall Brawl pay-per-view, the whole storyline is, can these guys trust each other? Are they going to be able to hold it together and beat the Dungeon of Doom? We get another sighting of the Chihuahua Pepe. Mongo chastises Pepe again for his cape and horns and tells him that he can't be a Dungeon of Doom fan. We also see Pepe in a bandana and sombrero, like he's some kind of little bandito. I forget what Heenan calls him. He calls him like a cockroach in a derby hat or something. Like he just gets it like totally wrong and makes fun of the dog. But so next week on Nitro, the day after the Fall Brawl pay-per-view, they announced that we're going to get Paul Orndorff versus Johnny B. Bad, and we're going to get the Blue Bloods versus either the American Males or the Nasty Boys. But they leave the rest of the card pretty vague, so we'll see what happens on the next Nitro. Kind of a fun fact, only 4 days after this Nitro episode, WCW fires Steve Austin. And that's a pretty big deal because, as most people know, he becomes the ringmaster and then Stone Cold Steve Austin in the WWF and propels them into a whole new stratosphere. In the same month, Turner merges with Time Warner, which actually put a new level of financial pressure on WCW to carry its weight and produce profit. This merger with Time Warner, along with the one with AOL a few years later, are thought to have been a catalyst in WCW's eventual demise. Before all of this, WCW was basically Ted Turner's little pet project, and he was just kind of eating losses for most of its early years. But then these mergers kind of created this new pressure, and I thought that was kind of interesting. That's something I never really knew about. Yeah, any final thoughts on the Go Home show before Fall Brawl?
There was one Mongo line right at the end, and I think it was directed at Bobby the Brain after Bobby insulted Pepe. He said, we got a weasel and a rat here, so we got the rodent family covered. Which, to call someone a rat, I mean, man, come on, Mongo.
Well, I couldn't.
It's a weasel reference too.
Well, was
from
he?
WWF.
Does that mean?
That's right.
Does that mean that he was calling Bischoff a rat? I was trying.
I don't know.
Yeah, like because Bischoff looked a little like what? like when Mongo was saying that, Bischoff was kind of like, what? Like, we got a weasel. Yeah, am I the rat? Like I was looking at Bischoff's face and I was like, he feels like Mongo's talking about him, I think, or something. Like Bischoff was clearly confused by that line. But what do you think, Tex? What do you think about this Go Home show?
It seems like WCW, with this being the second episode ever of Nitro, they're really still bringing out their big guns, and it seems like we'll get to the Raw episode, but it seems like the WWF is a little bit in their business as usual mode, whereas Nitro is really bringing out their big guns, trying to get the whole Nitro show over. And of course it's the Go Home show, so they're trying to hype up the pay-per-view as well. Overall I thought it was okay. Norton and Savage was the highlight for me. I thought every other match was extremely forgettable.
Yeah, I mean, it's really clear that they're trying to show like, we're the place with all the stars, we're the place that does our show live, we're the place that the big boys play, and WWF is just the shits. That's basically, I think, the big message that you were supposed to take away from this second edition of Nitro. Okay, so we get the first episode of Raw that actually coincides with Nitro, even though this is technically the 126th episode of Raw that ever took place. As we said during Nitro, this was a taped show from August 28th, 1995 in the Canton Civic Center in Canton, Ohio. This drew a 2.2 rating, so actually worse than Nitro. On commentary, we have Vince McMahon and Jerry the King Lawler. It starts with a recap of the recent SummerSlam pay-per-view, where Shawn Michaels and Razor Ramon had their second ladder match. And then Vince explains how Sid and Shawn Michaels are going to fight tonight, and that Sid is looking to tear down the Heartbreak Hotel. and he says that we're also going to get a Razor Ramon British Bulldog match, and shows clips of Bulldog beating up Diesel and officially turning heel. Vince claims that they're kicking off the, quote, new fall season. And we get a new introduction to the show where the wrestlers are battling on top of Titan Towers in Connecticut. The highlight is Shawn Michaels dancing atop a platform and then diving on top of Kama.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
Of both of you. I just, do you like it raw?
Sure.
Yeah, okay.
100%.
Sure.
Okay, all right.
I'm not gonna be like Mongo and say that this show is just a bunch of uncooked eggs. I think that's a little harsh.
I think there was a T-shirt, an old Monday Night Raw T-shirt that said "Sonny likes it raw," and I always tried to find it, but I couldn't find it.
That's incredible.
No way did WWF make that shirt themselves, did they? That's crazy.
I don't know. It was something, or
that's crazy.
I gotta check it out.
That's crazy, man. But what I'm really glad is they don't have that. What was that guy's name? Bartlett, who was doing. Do you remember?
It Rob Bartlett?
Yeah, like he was the worst. Like in the early days, the very early days of Raw, they had this like stand-up comedian doing commentary, and he was just the worst. Like he had no wrestling knowledge, and he really brought things down. And so I'm glad that it's just Vince and Jerry Lawler now. We also get some footage of Razor Ramon's confrontation with Dean Douglas at SummerSlam, which will play a role in the matches and the choreography to come. The show starts with the British Bulldog, accompanied by Jim Cornette, facing Razor Ramon, and the match goes for about 7 minutes. First off, I was a little confused as to why Razor was fighting Bulldog when Bulldog had beat up Diesel. Like, I know Hall and Nash are buddies in real life, but I mean, are we just supposed to believe that the faces are so honorable that they'll fight other guys' battles for them? I just really wasn't buying the booking here. Like, I mean, I know Bulldog was recently turned heel, but Kevin Nash was probably like injured or just needed the night off or something. Although he does appear later for a promo, so I don't know. I just thought this was kind of weird booking. But as I said in the previous Nitro review we just did, like I liked Razor's pyro here. I also like how he threw his toothpick at Cornette. That was a nice little touch.
Give me the background on this tennis racket.
So I'm a pretty big Jim Cornette fan. I listen to his podcasts a lot. I don't always agree with everything he says, but I agree with him more often than I disagree with him. Basically, Cornette's whole gimmick when he was coming up, he managed the Rock and Roll Express and a bunch of other people. And his whole gimmick was that he was like a spoiled mama's boy, basically. And so Cornette would come out in these, fancy suits, and I think he carried the tennis racket just because it looked like a country club kind of thing. Like, it made him look like he was some kind of, rich elite or something like that.
That's interesting.
And it also gave him a prop that he could just use to cheat. Like the face could come off the ropes, and then Cornette would just smack him with the tennis racket as he came off the ropes or something like that. And Cornette has told some stories about, like, back in the day when the fans would get, like, too involved. Like, one time a fan, like, jumped over the guardrail and tried to attack Cornette in, like, the middle of a match. And Cornette just hit him, like, horizontal with the racket, like, right across the head. Like, tomahawked him with the racket and, like, knocked him out and made him bleed and stuff. And, like, so apparently he also used the tennis racket as a real weapon for unruly fans.
Well, speaking of fans, okay, so I think the King referred to the tennis racket as a pooper scooper.
Yes.
Or he said he's coming out there with his pooper scooper or something. And Vince said, "Where's the pooper scooper?" And I thought this was kind of mean. They showed a picture of a female fan, and they said, "There's your pooper scooper."
Awesome.
So I got a kick out of that. There was also, and I don't know if you guys noticed this in the Razor Ramon match, but I noticed it, and then I couldn't stop noticing it for the rest of the show. There was a person in the crowd who looked like death, like pale face, like Marilyn Manson, and they sat motionless for like the entire Monday Night Raw, and I couldn't stop looking at them because it was just the weirdest thing. I thought I was watching The Ring. I had to have someone else like confirm that they saw it too. Otherwise, I thought it was like some ghost haunting me. But did anyone else notice this?
I didn't.
I didn't notice that particular fan, but what I did notice a fan with a Kenny Lofton jersey,
awesome,
walking around in the crowd, because this is Canton, Ohio, in '95. So I thought that was pretty cool.
I mean, so at one point, Undertaker had these fans who would sit in the crowd, and I think they were just called Creatures of the Night or something like that. And
that must have been it. That would make perfect sense.
Maybe, because like these plants, like they had these two fans that were plants, and it was like a guy and a girl, and they were dressed like goths and stuff, and like for a while they would just kind of sit, and they were called Creatures of the Night or whatever, which maybe makes sense since later in the night we do get a Goldust promo where he talks about the Undertaker and he talks about Creatures of the Night and stuff. But,
Yes.
But since Undertaker wasn't on the card, I mean, I don't know why those fans would have been there and why they didn't give them more attention, because it sounds like you just saw them on the hard cam, not like they actually did like a shot of them or anything. So I don't know.
Exactly. Yeah.
I don't know. That's pretty weird. Well, one thing is that since this was a pre-taped show and they had done another show in Canton, maybe those fans had something to do with the first show that they filmed in Canton, and then they were just still there since they were doing two shows at once. So maybe that explains it. Like maybe they played a role in the previous Canton show that they had taped. I don't know, but that's a good spot that you noticed that, because I didn't see them at all. So
yeah, that makes a lot more sense, because I was like, that person has to be there for a reason. No one would actually do that. The other thing, and I don't know if you guys noticed this also, when they did the opening, and they were showing the crowd and everything, they briefly show Vince and Jerry, and they're just standing in front of basically a green screen, with they try and set it up so that it like they're actually there, but they do a horrible job of it. Like the corner steel stairs are like giant compared to them, but it looked horrible.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because I was aware of that fact just from like my reading and things, but I actually didn't really make a note of it or pay that much attention to it during my watch. So, yeah, I did notice the pooper scooper stuff and found that to be a little confusing. I think they were bringing it up because of the British Bulldog. I guess it's like, he's a dog, so you need a pooper scooper or something. I don't know.
Real quick before you move on, they mentioned too that this was the first Raw that was being shown on like Sky TV over in Europe. And I'm curious, at this time, how big was WWF overseas?
Not as big as it is now, obviously. But like they would do European tours. That's pretty much the only place that they went. They didn't really, it's not like today where they're going to like Saudi Arabia and like kind of unheard of places like that. But yeah, they would do these European tours, and certain wrestlers were really big draws internationally. Bret Hart. Yep. Bret Hart, for example, always was a huge draw. Obviously, the British Bulldog, So I think it's kind of in its like infancy, them doing like the overseas shows and tours and stuff.
SummerSlam '92 was in Wembley Stadium.
Yeah, with like 80,000 people or whatever they claimed. Whatever they claimed. It probably wasn't quite that many, but it was a huge amount of people at that show. Yeah, like that show's awesome. During the match, from like an in-ring work level, I was pretty impressed with some of the stuff these guys were doing to each other. Bulldog's vertical suplex on Razor. Also, he did a press slam, like a gorilla press slam on Razor. And I mean, I was like, wow, this guy is super strong to get, Scott Hall up in that stuff. And then I was also really impressed that Hall was able to get Bulldog up in the Razor's edge. I was like, man, like he struggled a little bit, but he got him up and delivered it, and that was also very impressive because Bulldog is also not a small man.
I will say that the Razor's Edge, that seems like a difficult move to pull off.
Oh yeah,
you have to get them up, and then you have to basically reposition them off of a shoulder. Yeah, that seems tough.
And he's done it to like so many people, and it's always like impressive to me when he does it to someone like the Bulldog. It's just like, oh my god, like, and if you screw up the delivery of the move, you could definitely hurt them too. Yeah, so they're pretty vulnerable, and at a certain point they can't really help you very much. Yeah, like you're saying, like during that moment where you have to reposition the guy, like they can't really like help you. Like they can jump in the beginning to help themselves get up there, but like. Yeah, it's kind of just you have to muscle it out. So we get a ref bump, and we get some interference from Dean Douglas, who's just dressed in like jeans and a button down. I was like, why? Like I guess that's more realistic than him coming out in his ring gear, but just the way that he was dressed was just making me laugh. The whole Dean Douglas thing is just such a sham. The whole like professor gimmick is just really rough, and Shane Douglas is actually, like, to me, a pretty good worker, and he's pretty good on the mic, and so just to saddle him with this stupid Dean Douglas gimmick was a big mistake, I think. But Vince always did that. Like, if you were, like, self-made and you were over on your own, when you came into the WWF, Vince would just be like, nah, you're not going to be Shane Douglas anymore. I'm going to turn you into just some gimmick that I want you to be. And he just always seemed to do that to people, and usually it didn't work. 1-2-3 Kid comes out to try to help Razor, and I love how Kid just got totally punked by Dean Douglas like right away. He got punched in the face, and then Dean Douglas picked him up in a suplex and just dropped him on the top rope and just like totally trashed him right away. Douglas got some cheap shots in on Razor. Bulldog hits the running power slam, and then 1-2-3 Kid tries to help Razor, but then accidentally hits Razor. And so the ref calls a DQ on the Kid, and then Bulldog and Cornette give a serious beatdown to Razor and the Kid. And we have an interview with Ramon and the Kid in the ring afterwards, but I actually gave this match, even though the finish was not ideal, I gave this match 2.5 stars because I felt like the guys really brought it in their in-ring work, and I was pretty skeptical about the match when it started, so I think I was just kind of pleasantly surprised. But before we move on to the Kid-Ramon feud, what did you guys think of this match overall?
I will concur with the 2.5 stars. I was especially impressed with the way Bulldog could move for being such a big guy.
We're all in agreement here. I had 2.5 stars. I'm a big Razor fan. Great working punches. I was impressed with the in-ring work. I mean, you got a lot of signature Razor Ramon moves. You got his fallaway slam. You got a Razor's Edge. Bulldog's hanging vertical suplex was picture perfect. Jim Cornette is a heat magnet. I mean, and the after the post-match stuff where, Cornette, you're getting some Cornette stomps in there, and, the 1-2-3 Kid's interference was hilarious, as you mentioned, because he didn't do anything. He didn't help Razor at all. It was a complete fail. And funny enough, as I was rewatching this Raw, I had several like deja vu moments. I'm pretty sure I had this episode on VHS as a kid, and because I've seen it several times. Because I remember the finish of the last match with the 3 super kicks, but we'll get to that. But then I remember the Dean Douglas interference and everything, and I especially remember the 1-2-3 Kid and Razor promo that we'll get to here in just a second. But yeah, I gave the match 2.5 stars. I enjoyed it. I was excited about it to lead off Raw because I always enjoyed Bulldog's work as well. He's always a good worker. He seems like he'll put on a good match with like a top guy, but he was just always that guy. You wouldn't really give him the big belt.
Yeah, I mean, Davey had his liabilities because he had drug problems and just could like the most famous story about that is before SummerSlam 92 when he's going to have like the biggest match of his career and he's going to main event in Wembley with Bret Hart. He spent the whole previous night doing crack with Jim the Anvil Neidhart. Yeah. And so Bret had to basically just like carry him through that whole match and somehow managed to make it an amazing match even though Bulldog was hungover from doing crack. Yeah, I got to say the 1-2-3 Kid's plus minus in his whole interference there was pretty bad. He only had negative impact on the situation. So we get Ramon and the Kid in the ring afterwards with McMahon, and McMahon is kind of stirring the pot, and he's asserting that, the Kid just cost Razor the match, and then the Kid fires back and says, oh, well, what about last week when Razor, came in and cost me the match, and so they kind of go back and forth like that. I gotta say, Sean Waltman did a pretty good job here as 1-2-3 Kid. Like, he kind of looked like he actually might cry. Like, it was sort of effective. Like, he was like kind of flustered, and it really felt like, oh yeah, this guy's my friend, but I'm just frustrated and I'm tired of being like kept down and all of this stuff. So I actually thought it like worked pretty well as kind of the buddy, but now we're feuding kind of thing. I thought he was putting it over pretty well. Razor gave one of my favorite lines that he does when he calls Vince McMahon McMang. I love when he calls him McMang. That's like one of my favorite things. And then he also called Dean Douglas a bookworm. Thought that was funny.
Yeah, that's the line that really brought me back, because I remember that promo, and I definitely remember him saying, Dean Douglas, some bookworm, wants to take the bad guy to school.
When he does the glasses, he puts the glasses on his face.
Yeah.
Like, yeah. So, Business, what did you think of the Ramon Kid feud afterwards?
Razor, I can't stand the way he talks, and I get the reason why. I mean, I understand why they do it like that. I will tune in for the next week, although I already know it's happened. Even if this was contemporary, because it's going to be pre-taped again.
Right. And yeah, as we'll see at the end of Raw, they do like a Raw preview for next week, which basically gives away the fact that it's pre-taped. Yeah.
I couldn't believe that they were advertising the fact that Raw from next week is already in the books. Yeah. And they just have it on tape.
Especially since Nitro has just put out these 2 live episodes to combat you. Yeah, just very strange. Right now, we have like Gorilla Monsoon kind of playing the role of like president / general manager or what have you.
I'm going to correct you again. Interim president.
Interim president, yeah. Right.
And I don't, who was president? Was it
Jack Tunney?
It was Jack Tunney.
Oh, okay. And then how long has he been interim president?
That I'm not totally sure of.
Okay.
But while Gorilla was interim president, his whole thing was like to try to give the fans what they want, And I thought it was really funny that he had booked this Yokozuna and Owen Hart versus Men on a Mission. Like, that was his way of like giving fan service. I'm going to put these 2 heel teams against each other, and where only one of the 4 of them can actually work a match. And that's supposed to be like Gorilla Monsoon's form of fan service. I just thought that was kind of funny. Like, I think the whole idea was like, you never know what kind of matches you're going to get on the WWF. Like, I think they were trying to kind of be like Nitro, even though they weren't really at this point. So then we get the Smoking Guns versus Rad Radford and the Brooklyn Brawler. I never liked the Smoking Guns very much growing up. I couldn't really relate to the cowboy thing, and I just thought it was kind of lame. But I really feel like they were better workers than I remember, especially Billy Gunn, obviously. But both of them were pretty good. I like this sort of slingshot clothesline that they did, where Bart kind of whipped Billy in, and then Billy gave the clothesline. They also had these nice tandem drop kicks. I really like their sidewinder finisher they do, which is like a sidewalk slam and a leg drop combo.
I will say this match is where I noticed that the energy in that arena was just poor. Like, the fans did not seem into the show probably until the end of it. And just compared to Nitro, it seemed like a bad showing.
Well, I mean, there's a chance that those fans watched 2 back-to-back shows, because I think they might have just taped both at once. So if that's the case, like, it's tough for those fans to probably still have energy if they've already watched a whole hour, and now they're doing it again. And yeah, I mean, Brooklyn Brawler, I will say, like, as far as jobbers go, he's one of the top jobbers. I mean, he's one of the most famous jobbers, and he's a very, like, recognizable, memorable character. I can't say the same for Rad Radford, who was only around for a very brief time. I did like how Lawler claimed that Radford and Brawler were going to be on the cover of GQ. I thought that was pretty funny. Tex, you mentioned to me in a text message that Rad Radford used to do album reviews for WWF Magazine. Can you speak on that a little bit more?
Yeah, so, I was looking up some stuff for Jobber Watch here, because I love jobbers and I love jobber matches. I think they're necessary. Now, I just love the thing I like about jobber matches is that the guy that's beating the jobber, you're going to see exactly what he can do. And so, because you're not always going to get his whole arsenal against like top competition in big title matches, you're not always going to get every single move in his arsenal. But yeah, Rad Radford, he did do an album review column in WWF Magazine. Since his gimmick, his whole Rad Radford gimmick was supposed to be like a grunge rock gimmick.
Yeah.
And so, he did that. So I was wondering if you still had any of those magazines from back in the day.
I don't think so, but my guess is that you could probably find them on the internet. But there's some more Jobber Watch to be looking out for later in the show, so we'll get back to that. I liked at one point where Lawler was like making fun of Vince's clothes, and Vince said that his suit is French, and he said it's from J.C. Penney or like something like that.
Penier.
Yeah, Penier. And, actually kind of a weird fact about Vince McMahon is that probably not back in this day, but at some point at the beginning of each year, Vince would buy a different suit for each day of the month, and then he would just like go through them over the course of each month. Like, this is the suit for January 1st, and this is the suit for January 2nd, and he would just do that and then start it all over again in February.
That is awesome.
Yeah, he does it like every year. It was something that like Bruce Pritchard talked about on a podcast or something.
That is the sign, like that kind of eccentricity is the sign of genius. I think it explains a lot, or it points to Vince's genius.
Yeah, he's so interesting. Like, however you feel about Vince on like an ethical level or whatever, like he is such an interesting figure, and I really can't wait for the supposed biopic that is eventually going to come out about Vince's life. That's going to be awesome. But yeah, I mean, I gave this match like 1.5 stars. I mean, like, it's fine. Like the guns looked good and they beat up the jobbers, which I think was the whole point, but nothing you really need to go out of your way to watch. I think my favorite part of the Raw show was next, because we had the Goldust promo. And man, I just love Goldust, man. He, like, as weird as I thought he was as a kid, like, looking back on Goldust now, I'm like, this guy's promos were great. His in-ring work was really underrated. He just had something about him that was really different, and I think he could really get heat from the fans, when he would do his homoerotic things in the ring, and like, probably the funniest is when he gave Ahmed Johnson mouth-to-mouth resuscitation. That was
oh God, I forgot about that.
And I don't think Ahmed Johnson knew it was going to happen ahead of time either. And so I was like, oh my God, that's just the best. But anyway, so Goldust is cutting a promo. He quotes the Night of the Living Dead in the beginning, and he says, "Kill the brain and you kill the ghoul." And he's referring to Undertaker, but yeah, what did you guys think about this? I have some notes, but I wanna throw it to you. Tex, what do you think of Goldust ripping on the Taker?
Oh, I thought it was an excellent promo. I thought it was creepy, and like you mentioned, I thought he was extremely creepy as a kid. But then when you look at him now, his stuff ages really well. I mean, his promos were excellent, and he did have in-ring work, really good, smooth in-ring work for a bigger guy. He had some really impressive moves in there. And the only thing I really noted from the promo, I mean, he mentioned the Creatures of the Night, like y'all were talking about with the fans in the crowd. I didn't realize that was a reference to anything specific, but then when you mentioned those fans in the crowd, that did make a lot of sense.
What'd you think of Goldust business?
So I was a huge Undertaker fan as a kid, and I remember hating Goldust. And this promo is something that would have made me hate him, and I felt that hatred again in a good way, like an appreciative way. He really did a good job, so I enjoyed it a lot.
Yeah, for sure. I like how he said that gold sheds light instead of being subdued by darkness. And he talked about how he was going to get rid of the black cloud that looms over the WWF. It was great. And I mean, another thing I love about Goldust is his theme music. I love his theme music. It's so like catchy to me, and
it's excellent.
I still remember it too. Like,
yeah, and he's got the curtain call and the Shattered Dreams. I think the Shattered Dreams might be one of the best names for a move of all time, because he basically just like kicks the guy in the nuts. But like, yeah, that he's just awesome. I love Goldust. there was this one part at the end where Vince McMahon said this line where he said, Tu Wong Fu, eat your heart out. And I was very confused, and I was like, did he mean Fu Manchu? And then, like, when I looked into it, apparently there was this movie called Tu Wong Fu, which had, like, Wesley Snipes, Patrick Swayze, and, like, they were, like, drag queens. And so it came out in 95. So I think McMahon was making a reference to that as if, like, Goldust was a drag queen. But when he first said it, I was like, what are you talking about? Tu Wong Fu, eat your heart out. Like, I was just so confused, but thankfully it did have a logical explanation, and it wasn't just Vince McMahon, like, botching something. So we move on to another jobber match. We get Isaac Yankem versus Scott Taylor. But it goes for 2 minutes and 12 seconds. And yeah, I think this is a good time for Tex to do his jobber watch.
Yeah, so we'll jump right into jobber watch here. We're gonna highlight Scott Taylor. Probably familiar with Scott Taylor. He was also Scotty Too Hotty in the Attitude Era in the tag team called Too Cool with Brian Lawler, a.k.a. Brian Christopher, a.k.a. Grandmaster Sexay. Scott Taylor, he was the New England Wrestling Association heavyweight champion in 1989. He was their heavyweight champion. He came to the WWF in 91. Pretty much was a job guy, pretty much a jobber until 98 when he and Brian Lawler put together the tag team Too Much, which was later called Too Cool. He's currently a trainer at the WWE Performance Center. But yeah, jobber watch. It was pretty funny seeing Scott Taylor in there. Nice blast from the past against Kane, or Isaac Yankem, excuse me.
Yeah, same difference. Yeah, I mean, Yankem's theme music, I mean, come on. It's just like a dentist drill playing like over and over again.
Horrible. I don't know who thought that's a good idea. It just does not sound good at all. It's annoying.
Yeah, and he wrestles in scrubs. Like, his pants are like, medical scrubs, and yeah, I mean, and his finisher is called the DDS, which is just a really bad DDT. Like, it's not even a good. It's not even a good DDT. It's just, I think my favorite part of this match is when Jerry Lawler is talking about some article that came out where it said that like 4 out of 5 dentists say that it's okay for kids to eat peanut butter and jelly at lunch, and Lawler is like, Isaac Yankem is that 5th dentist, and he knows what's really true. And I just thought that was funny because you always see those things where it's like 4 out of 5 dentists or 9 out of 10 dentists, and I just thought it was a great idea of Lawler to be like, Isaac Yankem's that one dentist who disagrees with the rest. I just thought that was awesome. That was the only good part about it to me. Business, what's your take on Isaac Yankem versus Scott Taylor?
Well, so Isaac Yankem, real name's Glenn Jacobs, right?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Obviously another big guy, talented, being wasted on this stupid gimmick. I'm very happy where he eventually goes. The match itself was forgettable. You know what that guy is currently doing, right?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Well, you tell me then.
Oh, so he's the mayor of Knoxville County, Tennessee.
A good libertarian.
Yeah, and at one point recently he came back for Raw as like Mayor Kane, and he was just there like in a suit as Glenn
That
Jacobs.
is awesome.
Yeah, I don't really know how much of a role he played, but they introduced him as Mayor Kane. He was also the fake Diesel at one point. So, Glenn Jacobs.
Right.
Glenn Jacobs had 2 terrible WWF gimmicks before he finally emerged as one of the most famous gimmicks they've ever produced. And once he was Kane, like once he turned into Kane, he was around forever and was involved in like a ton of storylines. And until recently, he had the single record for the most eliminations in a Royal Rumble. But just recently here at the 2021, Brock Lesnar broke that record, which I was kind of pissed about. But Kane is a legend, and good for him that he's in politics now and doing well. So yeah, I gave this match 1 out of 5 stars, and I think that's maybe generous. So we get a report from Todd Pettengill about In Your House 3, and Todd notes that interim president Monsoon has said that if any of the participants in the triple header main event get intentionally disqualified, that they will forfeit their titles. In general, this triple header match had the most convoluted rules of all time. Like, it took Todd like a minute just to like explain how the match between Diesel and Shawn and Owen and Yoko was going to work, and it just sounded way too complicated. Todd also plugs the Razor Ramon versus Dean Douglas match. We got Bam Bam Bigelow versus Bulldog. We get Bret Hart versus Jean-Pierre Lafitte. We get a nice little clip of Lafitte stealing Bret's glasses from a fan. I thought that
it's horrible.
I thought that was awesome.
They showed the kid crying.
Thought that was awesome.
Instant heat.
Sucks for the kid, but
well, I'm sure they gave him something.
Yeah, but I thought that was great because it's like, for having very little build, and like for people being like, who is this Jean-Pierre Lafitte pirate guy? Like, they did at least a good job of like making him hateable. And I actually haven't seen that match, so I need to go watch it. But everybody I've heard says that Bret and Lafitte match is great. So
yeah, I've seen it.
Yeah, and I think the funniest part is he plugs Savio Vega versus Waylon Mercy. And Todd says that it is the Caribbean Don Juan versus the Southern Khan. And that made me crack up. I thought that was probably the most exaggerated hype of all time for any match. Like, who cares about Vega and Mercy? And then he's trying to, like, hype it up. But growing up, I didn't like Todd Pettengill at all. But in retrospect, I actually kind of feel like he was pretty good. Like, and he didn't really have much insider knowledge about wrestling. Like, he was definitely kind of an outsider. But in a way, he might have almost been too good for wrestling because he was always so professional and he never really, like, messed up. Like, he was a little corny at times and stuff. But, like, I really feel like he did a pretty good job overall. But that might be an unpopular opinion. But, I mean, I thought Todd was pretty good. This segment went a little too long. But it did make me kind of want to watch In Your House 3. So for whatever that's worth. Oh my God, this next segment was pretty embarrassing. So we get Barry Dudinsky, and he's trying to sell merchandise. So he's telling fans to call 1-800-TITAN-91 so that they can buy a leather Shawn Michaels hat, Shawn Michaels heart-shaped glasses, and a poster of Lawrence Taylor. And all I wrote down is, that hat is some serious Village People shit. That's all I wrote down about that hat. But God, Barry Dudinsky was just a geek. I mean, did you guys make any notes about this segment, or was it just so forgettable that you moved on?
I tried calling.
Oh, no, you didn't.
Yeah, I did.
Awesome.
The phone line no longer is in service. So
shocking.
Yeah, sadly.
Yeah, the only note I had was HBK merch. LOL. It was just comical.
Now all I can think about is Business wearing the hat and the heart-shaped glasses.
Oh
my God, that would be such.
That's what they have eBay for.
That'd be such a good look for you, man. That'd be incredible. I like how it was like $25, and he was just talking about how it was so much value to get the hat, the glasses, and the LT poster. Anyway, yeah, I don't think Barry Dudinsky was around for very long. I think pretty soon he was going to be replaced by handsome Doc Hendricks, who is a lot better at the job. So we get our main event of Shawn Michaels versus Sid for the Intercontinental Championship. As we noted in the Nitro review, Bischoff had given away this finish to all the fans who might have been tempted to change the channel. And he was right. The finish he predicted was exactly how it played out. At one point, Jerry Lawler said that Sid is just as quick and agile as Shawn Michaels. And I definitely laughed about that. I was like, come on, man. I mean, like, Sid did a nice nip up from his back to his feet. And I was pretty impressed that he could do that for how big he is. But, I mean, overall, that's quite an exaggeration to say he's as quick and agile as Shawn. I mean, Sid was pretty stiff in the ring overall. I have a note about Lawler making a comment about the previous night's Jets game. He made some comment about some field goal from the Jets game from the previous night, and I was kind of wondering, like, that probably was also another reveal that it was a taped show. I have a few notes about the actual choreography of the match, but I mean, what were your guys' impression of Shawn and Sid?
There was finally some energy. That's all I can say. But I mean, other than having it spoiled by Bischoff, I enjoyed the finish.
I gave it 2.5 stars. I'm not a huge fan of babyface, Heartbreak Kid. He's, especially around this time, he was starting to get, for me, he was starting to get a little bit ridiculous, especially some of the cringeworthy stuff after the match.
Oh, God.
But as far as his in-ring work, I mean, he was setting the pace. He set a really quick pace, the quick jabs, the drop kicks. Psycho Sid, he hit Shawn Michaels with a brutal-looking spine buster where the back of his head just bounced off the mat.
Yeah.
That looked stiff as hell. It looked like it hurt. And then, HBK selling that boot to the gut in the corner. Sid with the choke slam and everything. But yeah, the 3-kick finish, I do remember that one. The first 2 kicks looked like extremely weak. And then the one to finish him off was pretty good. But yeah, overall I gave it 2.5 stars, mainly because of Shawn's work in the ring.
Yeah, I mean, that's the rating that I gave too. I put it down for 2.5. Yeah, Shawn did his whole skinning the cat and coming back into the ring behind the guy's back, and then he delivered a drop kick to Sid. That was a nice spot. I did notice the spine buster. Yeah, Sid hit the choke slam, and then he tried to set up for the power bomb, but got it reversed into a back body drop. Yeah, Shawn did hit 3 super kicks, as Bischoff said, but one was just to the stomach. And then it was he was working up to actually hitting him in the sweet chin, for the sweet chin music. But as Tex alluded to the fact that Michaels basically started stripping down in the ring after the match. The female fans probably like that, but even the little kids were kind of going crazy, which was sort of creeping me out.
He started doing the whole take the pants off, and I was like, Christ,
I know,
stop.
I know, it's He did that at the 96 Rumble, too. He won the 96 Rumble, and then he started stripping in the ring, basically. Even more so than he did here. It was a decent main event. I think Shawn versus a big man is going to almost always be good. And Sid isn't that great, but I've come to realize that Sid is better than I remember. I think, especially when he was, Psycho Sid. His other Sid gimmicks, like Sid Justice, Sid Vicious, I don't know, but when he was Psycho Sid, and he was, I'm the master and the ruler of the universe and stuff, and just, I kind of liked Sid. The last thing we get is a Doc Hendricks interview with Diesel and Shawn Michaels backstage. They're basically setting up to the In Your House match with Yoko and Owen. Shawn Michaels does a lot of great talking, and then Diesel kind of follows up and says that they are 2 dudes with attitude, and that they are going to become the chaps with all the straps. And so it was a pretty typical HBK and Big Daddy Cool combination here, where Shawn did most of the work, and then Diesel just stood in the background and looked tough and made a couple one-liners. Any thoughts on this interview?
Not particularly. It was more HBK, pretty much doing everything. He really seemed like he was trying to run the show here, and he kind of knew that he was the top guy at this time. Brett wasn't on this show, and it seemed like HBK is just taking liberties at this point.
So we get a Raw preview for next week, which we mentioned earlier, and so we're going to get Yoko and Owen versus Men on a Mission, which is Gorilla Monsoon's present to the fans, I guess. We're going to get Ramon versus 123 Kid, but the WWF got a little too cute for its own good, and they hyped next week's show by, previewing clips from the action of the matches.
Yeah.
Thereby clearly giving away to the fans that they were taped. The Kid is even shown crying at the end, with Doc Hendricks asking the audience if the Kid will get respect or if he will lose a friend. And it was kind of clear that he was going to lose a friend. Don't set that up as being what we're trying to watch for and then give this clip at the end that sort of gives it all away. I was reading in the Death of WCW that pretty much right after Nitro premiered, Vince held a meeting with all of the WWF talent, and he tried to paint Ted Turner as being this evil billionaire that was trying to take out their mom and pop wrestling organization, which I thought was pretty funny and kind of manipulative. But and apparently Vince McMahon had been sending Ted Turner letters for almost a year, berating WCW as being embarrassing to his own promotion and asking Turner to shut it down. And they really, really disliked each other, because at one point Ted Turner tried to buy WWF and Vince refused, and that just left a really bad taste in Turner's mouth. Turner used to put the territories on his network. He used to put Georgia Championship Wrestling and Jim Crockett and Mid-South and But then when Vince put all those territories out of business, Turner was super pissed because he no longer had wrestling on his network. And so that's why, the WCW basically came about. And Turner even called Vince and was like, guess what, Vince, I'm in the wrestling business now. And he was clearly trying to just almost spite Vince, Wrestling had been so big for Turner's network in the early days that Turner just kind of fell in love with wrestling and, had told Bischoff that WCW is always going to be a part of our network. Do whatever you want. I want the wrestling on our TV, and, I want to go against Vince. And so for a very long time, Turner was just bankrolling everything that Bischoff wanted to do. But as I mentioned earlier, the merger that Turner had with Time Warner and everything kind of changed the game, because it was no longer just trying to please Ted, but, all these other stakeholders in the situation. So I'd have to say, for the first, quote unquote battle of the Monday Night War, where the two shows were actually going against each other, I would have to say that Nitro won for the week. It won in the ratings. I think I was more entertained by it. But what are your guys' take on the first battle of the Monday Night Wars?
I 100% agree. I think Nitro, more entertaining. The crowd was more into it. And, to the point you made earlier, maybe the WWF fans are just tired after maybe seeing a show prior to that one. The Raw was just very lackluster, and advantage goes to WCW for the week.
Yeah, we're in agreement here. Nitro seemed like I mentioned earlier, they were bringing out their big guns. You had more of their, the bigger stars on the roster were on the card. You had another Hogan match in the main event. You had a Savage match in there. Raw was coming off of a pay-per-view, whereas Nitro was going into a pay-per-view. So there was different energy there. But overall, Nitro put out a product, or WCW put out a product in Nitro that just seemed like they were trying to make a statement, whereas it seemed like another week for Monday Night Raw on the WWF.
Yeah, and I think that's going to be kind of the trend that we see for the next couple weeks. I think it's interesting because the WWF was already in kind of dire straits financially during this point. It's one of the most difficult financial times for the company. And so it's just kind of strange that, maybe Vince was just a little blindsided by all of this, but it just seems a little strange that they were so lax about the situation when clearly it should have been more of a threat. But I think pretty soon they're going to get the idea that we got to really fire back. And, next week we'll have the Nitro that follows the Fall Brawl pay-per-view. So we'll have a little report about what happened at Fall Brawl, and then we'll pick up with that very limited card that they announced. We'll see what happens on Raw too, where the Yoko and Owen versus Men on a Mission and Ramon versus the Kid and everything. But that'll be the September 18th, 1995 episodes next week. This is Frankincensed, and for Big Tex and Big Business, we're signing off, and hope you enjoyed the show.